Hi there.
Well, hello. Hello to you as well.
Back again so soon?
We're glad you came back. Thank you.
Yes, we are.
For our session number 23.
23?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Let's dive back in.
Let's dive in. The water is
The water's nice.
warm. What did we cover last time?
Maybe you should tell us what we covered. Just test your memory.
Maybe they remember.
Make a comment.
I bet they do, some of them. We covered a letter that was from the Master KH through his very good disciple, DK, Jwal Kul, the Disinherited. So this was received in January 1882, and DK said, "Honored Sir, the Master has awaked and bids me write." Now, it only says January 1882, but we actually have a little more information about that. Remember, he had been in a state of Samadhi for, it was actually just shy of 90 days. So here's another letter that I found that HPB wrote to someone, and it doesn't even say who it was written to. This is something that Daniel Caldwell, a student and researcher of the Secret Doctrine and of the Mahatma Letters, found at BYU.
And BYU seems very random.
Yeah, I have no idea how it ended up there, so there's no explanation online, but yeah, that's where it is. So she wrote to someone in this letter, Kuthumi awoke from his Samadhi on December 24th. She doesn't say, but it obviously was 1881. On the 1st of January, he communicated with us and is now teaching Mr. Sinnett philosophy again. So this is exactly the time period that we are in right now. So even though he wasn't able to communicate immediately, he was conveying information at this point through DK. And the reason for that is he had been through an initiatory process which would have raised his consciousness by a considerable amount. And after that almost 90-day experience, there is a long recovery period. It's not like he can just go back out into the world and take up his normal everyday activities.
He has to reacclimate to the physical world. When you operate in a different dimension, physical matter doesn't exist. Muscles don't work the same way. Your consciousness is virtually unbounded in a sense, but now we're back in the different substratum, and then we have to operate differently. That makes sense.
And apparently he had, during most of it or part of it, been in areas of our galaxy or somewhere in interstellar space where there are more advanced individuals than we have on our planet.
Wow.
So for a long time, he couldn't really stand the vibrations in the outer world at all. He even said he was unable to visit Adyar during that time because of the people there who still ate meat. He said he couldn't tolerate the atmosphere even at Adyar for a period of time. At the end of the letter from on behalf of KH, DK said, since Master will not be able to write to you himself for a month or two longer, though you will always hear of him, he begs you to proceed for his sake with your metaphysical studies and not to be giving up the task in despair whenever you meet with the incomprehensible ideas of M. Sahib's notes, the more so as M. Sahib's only hatred in life is for writing. In conclusion, Master sends you his best wishes and praying that you not forget him, orders me to sign myself your obedient servant, the disinherited. And then he says, P.S. Should you desire to write to him, although unable to answer himself, Master will receive your letters with pleasure. You can reply through D.K. Mahavallankar, so Damodar. Now, we went from this very high spiritual letter to a very different kind of letter.
So letter number 38, that's where we're moving forward?
Yes. Now let's set the stage here. Remember in the past when K.H. was corresponding with Sinnett just after he returned from London, and he had met all of these theosophists in London that he had not met before. One of them was Stainton Moses. And they were going through a list of people who potentially could be trained to be one of the chelas who could do the kind of work that HPB was doing, be an intermediary between the Mahatmas and the members of the Theosophical Society and the outer world. So Stainton Moses was one of those people. But they had tried him years earlier, and he had failed already. And Sinnett made the huge mistake of sharing large parts of that letter with Stainton Moses. For what reason, we can't even surmise. But he thought it would be helpful. And in the end, all it did was create an enemy for the Theosophical Society. But now we're going to get Stainton Moses' reply to the letter that Sinnett sent to him exposing all of this information. And keep in mind that Stainton Moses is very British. He keeps everything calm and doesn't lose his cool. But it's kind of interesting to get this information. Now, he's a spiritualist. Many of the people, the members of the Theosophical Society in London at that time, had been spiritualists before they became theosophists. And they did not give up their spiritualist beliefs in favor of theosophy. They were trying to reconcile the two. And as we know, you can't reconcile them. But the masters were hoping to move them from their position over to their own position of understanding how the universe works.
I wonder what their theories are on the planes of existence, because a ghost or a shell of a recently deceased person exists in a certain dimension that's different than the physical. In theosophy, we would call it the astral. I wonder if the spiritualists have a hierarchy of planes.
They don't.
Okay.
It's spirit and matter. They've got two. Spirit and matter.
Okay.
So it's extremely limited. And their version of spirit is what they call sometimes the Summerland. It's this very nebulous concept.
Well, to our viewers, this is a good time to remind ourselves that, I guess we can say in theosophy, but we, Terry and I, and many people who follow the traditions that we follow, spirit and matter are the same thing.
Yes, exactly.
There is no difference. The things that appear more dense just have less spirit and more matter. They're just that. They're more dense.
It's a very large gradation.
It's a gradation or a continuum.
The absolute most divine, most spiritual aspect, all the way down to the most material. So there's this huge spectrum.
Yes.
They, on the other hand, have spirit and matter.
Yes.
That's it.
It's almost like the ocean, and then above the ocean is the air, and they're not the same. You know when you're in the air, and if you do a belly flop into the water, you know you're in the water. They're very different.
That's a very good analogy. But in real life, we have water, we have air, but we have earth, and we have
gas.
gas, and even beyond that, because that's only the physical
light,
world. That's only one part.
Electromagnetism, and then other things that are beyond that. And yes.
It's all energy.
Yeah.
Everything is made from energy. Okay. So keep in mind, too, that Stainton Moses was a medium. And he was not only a medium, he was a trance medium, which was relatively rare in the spiritualist circles. There were lots of people, both male and female, who were mediums. They could supposedly communicate with the spirits of people who had died. And they could bring back information on all sorts of things, supposedly. But a trance medium was one who was so receptive and so open to these other influences that he or she could basically go into a trance, go to sleep, be completely unconscious, and then a spirit would come into their body and animate it, be able to write or speak, give messages, and the individual would know nothing about what took place at that time. So someone else would have to write down all of the information, and the person would only learn afterwards what had been said while they were sleeping. Now, HPB was not a trance medium. The Mahatmas were able to step into her body whenever they needed to do that, to write something or explain something. And she was completely conscious, but outside of her body, watching everything that was happening. So nothing ever happened without her awareness. Very different, these two types of mediumship, if you even want to call it that.
I believe Edgar Casey was a trance medium.
Yes, he was. He did not remember anything that happened. And there's one interesting thing. He was a devout Christian. And yet,
Casey?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And yet, when this entity or group of entities manifested through him and gave messages, they sometimes referred to previous lives of his patients. Mm. And he really didn't like that because he didn't believe in reincarnation.
Oh, wow.
But over time, he grew to accept it reluctantly because everything else made sense. So just an interesting aside there. All right, let's hear from Stainton Moses. This letter was written on November 26th, but it wasn't received in Bombay until January, more than a month later, because it had to be transported by ship in the mail.
Are we to assume that this letter was written in his hand, like by Stainton Moses, yes, in his handwriting?
Right.
And it was physically mailed,
from London.
There wasn't any metaphysics involved with this letter?
No.
Okay.
Except, while it was in transit, I guess on the ship or somewhere between London and the arrival in Bombay, some additions appeared on the letter.
So something metaphysical did happen.
So that part was. The letter itself, no, it was a standard letter. But when Sinnett received it, it had some additional notes on it written in Morya's handwriting. So.
And it was Morya, since KH was not still communicating at this point.
Right.
And Sinnett is replying, Stainton Moses is replying to the harsh comments that were disclosed against the master's suggestion.
Right. Although they didn't step in and stop him from sending it. Instead, they let their chela's make mistakes. Because,
you mean they didn't stop Sinnett from sharing it with him?
Right.
Because he did it in person, I believe. He talked.
Well, he explain what you mean by that.
Sinnett divulged the information to Stainton Moses
in a letter.
Oh, okay. It wasn't in person.
No.
Oh, okay.
In a letter. And No, even though the Mahatmas were aware that he was sharing it, they didn't stop him from doing it because they don't interfere with their Chela's karma. It's all about learning. It's about lessons to be learned.
This is the response from Moses to Sinnett.
Right.
Okay.
So you're going to read Stainton Moses's part, and I'll read. There's only a few comments that we're going to cover. I, again, have reduced this down by at least 50%.
My dear Sinnett, I ought to have answered your letter before this, but deferred doing so till I had had the pleasure of a conversation with Mrs. Sinnett.
All right, so this was written at the end of November. Mrs. Sinnett had stayed in London with their little 4-year-old son. Let's see, 4 years old. And she stayed because of health reasons. So she didn't arrive until January of the following year. But while she was in London, obviously, Stainton Moses met with her, and he's referring to that meeting.
This I have had, and greatly to my enjoyment. She is, as you led me to expect, thoroughly convinced of the reality of what she has seen and heard. Like me, she does not know what to make of the last departure. I mean, in respect of my spirit experiences.
So he's saying, yeah, I had this conversation. I shared with her all the information that you sent to me, and she's just as confused as I am. I can guarantee she wasn't as confused as he was, but she was circumspect enough not to say anything.
Smart. I really do not know what to say about it. There's no way of harmonizing facts with the claim made.
All right, so facts is what he's going to present, which is, we'll see what it is. And then the claim made, meaning the comments by the Mahatma to Sinnett, which were shared with Stainton Moses.
A real quick preview. Basically, what's happening here is that the masters and Sinnett are they are discrediting in a certain sense the highly elevated spirit that Stainton Moses claims to be communicating with.
Well, yeah, we better set the stage on that, because his main spirit guide, Stainton Moses, is called Imperator. And we'll find out who this Imperator is in a few minutes. But starting in about 1873, a member of the hierarchy used that means to communicate with Stainton Moses, to test him to see if he was open to receiving much higher types of information regarding how life works and these other realms of existence. So he had been tested for a long period of time. And the individual who actually communicated was not one of the Mahatmas, it was not the Mahachohan, but as we will find out, it was apparently a Dhyan Chohan, one of the very highest members of the hierarchy on our planet. Someone that the Mahatmas themselves are not directly in communication with, apparently, as far as we can tell. So it was a very high member that, starting in 1873, was making this experiment. And we'll see how that turned out. As it turned out, Stainton Moses wasn't very perceptive. He couldn't tell the difference between an astral entity and this extremely highly evolved member of the spiritual hierarchy.
Just to say that in other words, Stainton Moses thought he was communicating with his own spirit guides, but a very elevated being from the hierarchy of our planet stepped in and maybe impersonated or appeared to Stainton Moses and offered information, and Stainton Moses didn't, he kind of discarded it.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. There is no way of harmonizing facts, that's his facts, with the claims made, and to your belief that, quote, the brothers cannot be ignorant, cannot be mistaken, end quote. I can only reply that they most undoubtedly are in both matters with respect to me.
So these brothers that you revere so highly are not only mistaken, but they are ignorant.
This would merely be my opinion were it not for the fact that I have an unbroken chain of documentary and other evidence extending in sequence from the first time Imperator appeared down to yesterday. These are all dated communications, notes, and records. When the old lady first hinted at some connection between the lodge and me, I entered at once into the thing with Imperator and put the case over and over again. Here is one record which I transcribed.
All right, so the old lady, of course, is HPB. He, starting in 1873, was writing to her. She was in America at the time, so they were corresponding back and forth. He was hopeful that she could explain some of this information and some of the things that were going on. Unfortunately, well, it's not unfortunate, it's just what is. She had been told not to reveal too much detail about what was going on because he was being tested. So she had a very good idea and maybe knew exactly who this being was, but she wasn't allowed to divulge that information to him.
Here's one record which I transcribed, December 24th, 1876. I asked some questions respecting a letter from HPB in which she says in reply to one of mine, quote, if you are profoundly certain that I have not understood you, both your intuition and mediumship have failed you. I never said that you had mistaken Imperator for another spirit. He is not to be mistaken once he is known. He knows, and his name be blessed forever.
So she apparently knows who this very high member of the hierarchy is, but she's not allowed to reveal that information, so she's just kind of being vague here.
You want objective proof of the lodge. Have you not Imperator, and can you not ask him whether I speak the truth?
So
she's saying if you have this high being that you think you're communicating with, ask him.
Yeah, exactly. But he apparently didn't receive the answer from the high being. He received it from some lower being.
To this, the answer written was long and precise. Among other things in this, the first person plural is always used by Imperator.
And then Morya writes one word in there, why, question mark.
And this was the interception, like, so when Morya
Right.
was making comments, this is, yeah, so
And-
why would Imperator use the first person plural as in we?
And we just happen to have the answer to that from Imperator himself. So this is one of the very early This is one of the very earliest messages that Stainton Moses receives. Unfortunately, we don't have the date on it, but it explains who this Imperator is.
And again, he would have been in a trance, and somebody else would have been, what, transcribing?
Most likely. There, we will find later that there are instances when he is not in a trance and can see and hear Imperator himself. Keep in mind, too, that anyone appearing from a different realm to someone, a medium on the physical plane, can assume whatever form they want. It's completely fluid. So if they want to appear as an animal, they can, or as a human being, or impersonate someone, they can. Impersonate one of the Mahatmas, they can appear to a medium, a clairvoyant.
In the physical or in the astral?
In the astral.
Right. It's very easy to do that
They
in the
don't
astral.
they don't have the capacity to materialize fully, but enough for a clairvoyant to see them. All right, so this is the early communication from Imperator. The communicators who delivered the message described themselves, plural, and this is Stainton Moses who's setting the stage here. The communicators who delivered the messages described themselves as a band of spirits led by Imperator, who was recorded as saying in an early sitting, "I myself, Imperator Service Dei," using a Latin phrase which means servant of God. "Am the chief of a band of 49 spirits, the presiding and controlling spirit." So he's the chief spirit of 49 other spirits. Pretty elevated, I guess. "Under whose guidance and direction the others work. I come from the seventh sphere to work out the will of the Almighty." So God the Father.
We don't know what he means by seventh sphere. Do you think he means what in theosophy, the spheres?
No. Well, it's just this metaphysical term of the highest, whatever that might be.
Okay.
From the seventh sphere to work out the will of the Almighty. So that would be the realm where God lives. "And when my work is complete, I shall return to those spheres of bliss from which none returns again to earth. But this will not be until the medium's work on earth is finished," meaning Stainton Moses, "and his mission on earth exchanged for a wider one in the spheres." So, yeah, that not only is Imperator this highly, highly evolved something, but also the medium he's working through is very special, and he's going to be working on behalf of God too at some point. So just to set the stage of who we're dealing with here.
Let's give a real quick opinion on that. Let's be very direct and honest. It's most likely an astral entity, just or appearing to be some very special being. And this happens to a lot of people where they believe they're receiving messages from an elevated, and we say this almost every session, so this is probably like a broken record moment for us, but let's just be clear on what we believe Imperator and his 49 other spirits are. Mischief makers maybe, could be more nefarious than that, but we don't believe that they're anywhere near the Almighty, like he says.
No, and more often than not, they reflect the beliefs and feelings of the person that they are appearing to. So it's not unusual that they would be in complete agreement. They graciously told me what a great job I was doing. And that's the kind of florid sort of message they get all the time. As we pointed out, if either the messenger or the one they're communicating with seems to have a big ego, you probably want to just walk away and look somewhere else.
If you didn't know the etymology of astral, of the reason why this dimension of most clairvoyance is called the astral plane or realm, astral comes from, I think it's Greek, it's astron, which means star.
I think it's Greek.
Or it could be Latin, maybe Latin. But it means, it's the star-like realm. It's flashy and exciting, and people look fancy, and there's entities that appear elevated and make you feel elevated as well. And it's a dreamland, basically.
Yeah, it's a total dreamland, and often referred to as the state of glamour.
And that's why our tradition that we study tells us to almost wholly ignore the astral realm and attempt to raise to a samadhic state, which is not in the astral realm at all. It's the higher mental, the Buddhic plane, and the above or more refined dimensions where nothing fake and I shouldn't say that. That's not entirely accurate. Nothing glamorous or flashy or ego attracting exists in the higher realms. So.
And it's unfortunate because when you do the type of work that we do with Raja Yoga, where you're trying to raise your consciousness beyond the astral to a higher level, it is even more impressive in the feelings, the sense that you get of peace and bliss, and it's a wonderful realm to contact, but it's not exciting and dramatic like the astral realm is.
Do you think that any lies or we couldn't be fooled or tricked in the mental realm, could we?
The higher mental realm, no. Now, keep in mind there are two parts to the mental planes. The lower part is what you can write down in words, pictures, data, things like that. Write a book, a novel, a lesson manual. But on the higher level of that, it's a transmission of ideas.
Concept that you just absorb.
Exactly.
Yes.
It cannot be put directly into words. You can try to describe it by bringing it down a notch, but on its own level, it's intuition. That's intuition. It's very precise, but it isn't in specific words.
It's just, I know this is off topic, but I wonder if a very powerful dark force, dark brother of the shadow could operate on the higher mental and create something. But I doubt it. It's challenging to even talk about that, because the way that it works is the thought form is sent in its entirety. You can't fake it or say it is something else. Right. So lies don't exist there, really, huh?
Yes, yeah. And that's why we want that realm. That's where we want our consciousness.
Pure.
Your soul, your higher self, is pure.
Pure, yeah.
It is. It's not the highest form of spirituality, but there is no deception. There are no lies on that level.
That's what this is interesting. Yeah, this is okay.
And the brothers of the shadow absolutely work on the astral and lower mental realms.
Very interesting. Back to the letter. Sometimes I take us off track, but this is interesting. Okay. Morya interjects and says, why? Why would Imperator use the first person plural? And we just heard why, and so now this letter is going to continue. So now this is a quote. So this is now what Stainton Moses has received from Imperator, right?
Yes.
So Imperator is speaking now.
So this is yet another message that he receives. This is part of his proof that what Sinnett said was wrong. Whatever the brothers conveyed to him was nonsense.
Yes. So Imperator says, we have already told you that your American friends understand neither your character, nor your training, nor your spiritual experiences. So, far from your intuition having failed you, it has protected you.
So once again, he's saying you were smart to throw that out, because you were absolutely right.
We were not able to say how far any with whom your correspondent is in communication can give her a correct account of you. It is doubtful, so far as we know, though some have the power as Magus.
And Magus, I assume, is one of his other spirit guides. He doesn't explain that.
But even he does not understand. I will try one more honest medium, Eglinton. When he is gone, and see what comes of it.
Now, Eglinton is going to come up again. We're going to hear his name a few times. He's actually going to go to India at one point, and the Mahatmas are going to watch him the entire time while he's in India. One of his purposes in going there was to investigate this claim that there were highly developed individuals in India, and he was hoping to meet one of them possibly. We'll see what happens. It's quite interesting.
I will do that much for the society.
Now this is Imperator speaking. I will do this much for the Theosophical Society. I've told you already that it's nonsense, but I'll give it one more shot.
His work is other than ours, and he is not concerned with your inner life. Now, this is Eglinton?
Yes.
Okay. If any have the power, they have not been willing to exercise it. We do not understand whether it is pretended that we ourselves have given any information. It seems that the hint is conveyed without direct statement. We may say at once clearly that we have at no time held any intercourse with your friend on the subject. She does not know us in any way.
And that's HPB.
And we know nothing of this lodge or brotherhood.
Okay, and then now Stainton Moses continues as an aside. He says,
as to my mistaking a personating spirit for Imperator, it was said, and then this is
and
now
then the Imperator again
replies,
says this.
Assuredly, you would not mistake any other spirit for us. It would be impossible. We are what we have revealed ourselves to you. No other. We have been permanently your guardian with a capital G, and no other takes our place. End quote. And so on, quite unmistakably. I may say, this is now Stainton Moses
Right.
again. I may say here that Imperator stated when he first came to me, and many times subsequently, that he had been with me all my life, though I was not conscious of his presence till he revealed it. The coherent development of my mediumship has been uninterrupted. There is no gap. Now objective mediumship is gone, and my inner spirit sense is opened.
All right, so this is, well, he wrote it at the end of 1881. He is no longer acting, for the most part, as a medium. As we've said before, mediumship takes a horrible toll on people. And many of them end up with serious health problems, both physical and mental. And it's the same with him. He wasn't a robust individual to begin with, neither mentally nor physically. But all of this mediumship has worn him out and has caused a lot of health problems. So he stopped doing it. Now he claims to be just studying and working on his own spiritual development.
Only yesterday I sought and got from Imperator, who was clearly visible and audible to me, an exact and precise renewal of what he has so often repeated.
So he's still doing it, even though he stopped doing it for other people, apparently.
So I would be ashamed to seek a repetition of his assurance. Whatever may be the explanation, rest assured that not only is he not a brother, but that he knows nothing whatever of any such beings.
All right, so Morya writes his little notes here. A brother? Does he even know what is understood by the word brother? Does he know what we mean by Dhyan Chohans, or planetary spirits? By the disembodied and embodied Las, LHAS? And that's a term they've used before to indicate the level of a Mahatma, an adept. But it is and must remain for some time to come a mere vexation for all of us, for all of you. My letter is private. You may use the arguments, but not my authority or my name. It will all be explained to you, rest assured. A living brother, meaning a Mahatma, may show himself and yet be ignorant of many things. But for a planetary spirit to show himself so completely ignorant of what is going on around him, that would be most extraordinary.
And he's referring to Imperator as believing Imperator believes himself to be as high as a planetary spirit.
Well, yes, and he's also referring to the fact that he actually did receive some instructions from a planetary spirit. But in all of his proofs here, he never included any of those that actually came from a planetary spirit.
Because he didn't believe it was, he thought it was Imperator.
He probably didn't understand, or for whatever reason, he picks and chooses the information that show him to be correct in his presumptions.
So Moses continues, your warning as to my being on the wrong scent, if I supposed this were a made-up story of the old ladies, is heeded. One must entertain every sort of theory to account for such a thing, but I would not have been defending her against every kind of calumny for years, if I thought her capable of a mere vulgar fraud. An allegation such as this, confronted by such plain and perfect testimony as I bring, must be capable of some sort of proof if it is to be seriously entertained. Unfortunately, the fact is that not only is the claim incompatible with all the facts, but the alleged facts put forward are just those, and only those, known by me, and the guesses made are so ludicrously far from the truth that it is plain they are mere guesses. That is a destructive criticism from the negative side. Now, what positive proof is produced? None. Can any be given? This brother who cast his eye on me at Mount Athos and assumed the style and title of Imperator. What did he ever say to me or tell me? When and where did he appear, and what proof can be given of the fact? During a long intercourse such as he claims, he can surely produce some positive evidence to rebut the presumption drawn above.
All right, so he's playing the part of a debater here. He said, I've shown you my proof that what you say is false. Now, he's thrown down the gauntlet, the challenge. Now, you show me your proof. And he's assuming that Imperator, in the role of a planetary spirit, is going to say, okay, I can tell you this. But as Morya is going to point out, we have no intention of engaging this man any further. He was tested for a long period of time. He failed, and we're not going to go over any of that again.
If not, any sane person would know what conclusions to draw.
Meaning that they have no proof.
Mm-hmm. Pardon me for pursuing this subject at length. I sadly fear that Fragments of Occult Truth, which is a publication.
No, that's the column in the Theosophist that Hume had been writing.
Ah, okay. I sadly fear that Fragments of Occult Truth show that spiritualism and occultism are incompatible. So he's even admitting that they're incompatible.
Yeah. And they are. They're absolutely incompatible. But the Mahatmas had their hopes, and even the Dhyan Chohans had their hopes at one time.
I should be heartily sorry if you were to waste your time and force over anything that cannot base itself demonstrably on truth. Hence my desire to have this raked out. Otherwise, I should dismiss it with much contempt. Hearty good wishes. Yours ever, W. Stainton Moses.
Very English. Hearty good wishes. Yes, very English. So
Morya says some more things.
He does say some more things here. I just want to point out a couple. Most of them are not really too important at this point. But he mentioned in one of the parts that I excised from our extracts, he says, Morya, as to Edward Maitland, he is as true and as honest and sincere as Stainton Moses, though neither one knew the other. Edward Maitland was also a spiritualist. And the masters had been watching him and a lady who will appear from time to time in these letters, Anna Kingsford. She's the one, remember, who was a medical doctor trained in France, and she was a vegetarian and anti-vivisectionist, and she had a very strong belief in the Hermetic philosophy, which was very popular for several hundred years. It was kind of a mashup, as we've said before, between some of the Egyptian mysteries and Christianity. That was one form of Hermeticism. And it actually has some validity to it. We'll find later that there are going to be two factions in the London Lodge. One will be the theosophists who are devoted to the teachings of the brothers from Tibet, and the other will be devoted to her and the teachings of Hermeticism. And we're going to have a clash here coming up in a few months. So let's see. So he says, and does Mrs. Kingsford feel just as sure as Stainton Moses does with regard to Imperator, that she saw and conversed with God, and that she had talked with and received a written communication from the spirit of a dog just a few days before? So even though they said that she and her supporter, Edward Maitland, are sincere and honest, they've got some very strange ideas. She was convinced that she had seen and conversed with God.
Oh,
and only a few days previously, she said that she had been conversing with a dog. So that's, I don't know. I don't know quite what to make of these people. And yet, they were hopeful that they could do something with them. This shows me that at least in 1881 and 82, they were still struggling to find anyone that they could train the way they had trained HPB. They're really, really beating the weeds to try to get somebody to come forth and be trainable. And I'm afraid that even in 2024, there are not a whole lot that they're able to find. If they are, they're hiding somewhere.
Okay, back on track. Now we're on letter number 39, received in Bombay, January of 1882. And who are we hearing from this time?
This is Morya still.
Okay, this is
It'll
from
be
Morya.
a little while before we have a direct communication from KH.
Okay. From Morya. It was certainly KH's and my great desire that, since Scott could not attend the anniversary, you should, not to take any part in its proceedings, but simply to be present at it.
All right, so we need to set the stage here. January of 1882, Sinnett's wife and child were arriving from England at Bombay. So he was going there to meet them and accompany them back to Allahabad. But it turned out that the 6th anniversary of the Theosophical Society founding had been delayed. It normally would have been in November of 1881, but because Alcott was in Ceylon, Sri Lanka, and for other reasons, they had delayed it until January. So they had both hoped that Sinnett would arrange things so that he could be there at the same time as this anniversary meeting in Bombay, because he was going there anyway. So they strongly hinted that that would really be nice if you could show up for that meeting. Well, he didn't. He went and picked up his wife, and he said, "Yeah, I'm afraid that I need to get back right away because my bosses are after me right now, and they're not happy with what's going on, and I need to get right back." So he picked up his wife and son and went right back to Allahabad and didn't stay for the meeting.
Which bosses are you talking about?
His at the newspaper.
Okay.
The Mr. Radigan and whoever his partner was.
Okay. This poor organization will once more exhibit its representation without one single European of position and influence. But neither.
Notice if you look at some of the early photographs of HPB and Alcott at some of their meetings, whenever they appear with a group of theosophists, it's almost entirely the natives, the Indians that they appear with. And so that's what he's referring to. It would be nice if we had some representation from other Europeans. But remember that a lot of the Europeans of status kind of stayed away from any intermingling with the natives. There was a high degree of racism there. And Sinnett and Hume are not entirely willing to mingle too much with the natives.
They know that Morya and KH are Indian.
Yes, they do.
Darker skin, probably, right? I mean,
actually, KH had very fair skin. He had brown hair, but I can't remember what color eyes, but he was very fair skinned. Morya, I'm not sure. I think he was a little darker.
But neither of us would force a course of action upon you against your wish. Therefore, what I say must not be construed as an order or urgent request. We think it would be good, but you must obey your own cool judgment, more importantly, perhaps since today marks a crisis. One reason for my calling you was KH's wish that you should be brought under certain magnetic and other occult influences that would favorably act upon yourself in the future.
So he missed out on an opportunity. They tested him by suggesting that he stay for this meeting. He didn't, but if he had, they were planning what sounds like a Shaktipat, a magnetic raising of consciousness. Missed opportunity again. This is not the first time Sinnett or Hume has missed a great opportunity.
Wow.
Lessons for us to learn.
Mm-hmm. I will write more tomorrow, for I still hope you will give us a day or two. So let us have time to see what can be done for you by Kutumi.
So they haven't ruled it out completely, but apparently this is kind of a black mark
A
against
demerit
it.
or something.
A demerit,
Yeah.
exactly.
Now, that was the end of that letter. It was very short.
Yeah, then we have a couple of very short ones here.
Letter number 40. So this was the same month, January 1882, because he said, give us a day or two. The man sent by me last night was a Ladakhi Chela and had nothing to do with you. Do we know what's going on here?
No, we don't have any background information. Ladakh is a region at the very north of India, what is referred to as Kashmir sometimes.
So
and
there was
it's one of the regions I visited in India and was by far my favorite part of India to see.
Wow.
It's almost entirely Buddhist rather than Hindu. Mm-hmm. So who this Ladakhi Chela was, I don't know.
But a student of his.
But apparently it was a Chela who came to visit Sinnett.
Mm-hmm. What you just said about initiation is true. Any fellow who truly and sincerely repents ought to be taken back. As you see, I am with you constantly. So,
yeah.
But we don't know what he said about initiation.
No, we don't know any of that. So
he might have been talking to he was having a conversation,
right.
And Morya was aware.
Exactly.
And Morya sends a letter.
Right.
Saying what you just said about initiation is true.
So they were obviously talking about some Chela who had committed some error, some faux pas, but had repented, and basically Morya says, we're always willing to give people another chance.
And he says,
and then the fact is that I am with you constantly. They are watching them constantly.
They must be able to divert or split their consciousness.
Of course.
Because they're not only focused on him.
Right. And remember when HPB was aware of two different people at the same time, not physically present with her, but one was passing through Bombay, and one was, I believe, DK. And both of these individuals, one a master and one a chela, she was paying attention to at the same time and getting confused because she couldn't sort out the different thought forms.
I know that we've discussed this many times, but how are we assuming that this letter number 40 showed up into Sinnett's life?
Actually,
do you think
we
it like
don't know.
fell out of nowhere, or?
We have no idea exactly where some of these came from. There's no mention by Sinnett or anyone else.
The reason why I'm asking is because it sounds like it might be in real time, because Morya says what you just said about initiation. So if Sinnett is having this conversation, this letter might have appeared on the table right there. Oh, there's a letter from Morya right there.
Possibly.
And I know our viewers are probably thinking, come on, guys, really? But there are metaphysical phenomena that exist. And some of these letters were sent through the mail, but some appeared out of nowhere.
Yes, and if one of their chelas was in the vicinity, that would be more
okay. A chela
apt
could
to
have
happen.
So maybe more times than not, a chela would physically write it based on a transference of thoughts.
And and when they write it, most often it's actually in Morya's handwriting, or a very close facsimile thereof.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's how close they are. That they can write in their handwriting.
Okay, letter 41, same month, January 1882, so maybe a few days later. Morya says, I cannot make a miracle, or I would have shown myself fully to Mrs. Sinnett at last I cannot make a miracle, or I would have shown myself fully to Mrs. Sinnett at last, in spite of the machinations of the French woman, and to yourself in spite of the physical and psychical conditions.
All right. This is referring to when Sinnett was in Bombay to pick up his wife and son. And he's talking about the French woman. I assume that it's Madame Coulomb, who wasn't actually French. She was English, but she was married to a Frenchman, Alex Coulomb. We're going to hear a lot about Alex and Emma Coulomb because they're going to end up causing an enormous amount of trouble for theosophy and the HPB. Huge amount of trouble. Yeah. So they had been hired because they came to HPB at one point. Emma Coulomb had met her one time in Egypt, I believe, and had helped her out with something. HPB had helped her. So when they came to see her in India, they were complaining that they had no funds and they needed work. And so because he was skilled as a handyman and she could do household functions, they hired both of them. But as it turned out, it was probably a big mistake. But machinations, we're not certain because in the letter it says matches, M-A-T-C-H-E-S, and so the editor of that assumed maybe that Morya meant machinations, so don't put too much on that. It's not for certain that that's what Morya had intended.
Kindly realize that my sense of justice is so strong that I would not deny you a satisfaction I gave Ramaswamy and Scott.
So Morya actually appeared phenomenally to these two individuals. Ross Scott, we've heard of before.
We didn't, we heard Scott, but we didn't actually say who that was.
Well, he was the secretary of the Shimla Eclectic Society, a young Irishman, and someone that they had their eye on as far as training as a chela. Ramaswamy was a Hindu, an Indian, who also was a chela, or at least on probation. And Morya had appeared to both of them, whether it was physically or in the etheric body. He can appear at whatever level he chooses to. But both of them were able to see him. Sinnett has been desperate to see one of the masters, or in any form.
Oh, so Sinnett and him have not ever seen...
No.
They've never seen them at all?
Not yet.
Oh.
No. So, and Sinnett is kind of itchy about that. He's just itching to see one of them.
Wow.
So he has to explain, don't be upset that I appeared to these two.
If you have not seen me, it is simply because it was not, or if you have not seen me, it is simply because it was an impossibility. If you had gratified KH by attending the meeting, there would have been no harm to you, for KH had foreseen and prepared all, and the very effort made, even at supposed personal risk, would have totally changed your condition.
So he said, this excuse you gave, that you were afraid that you were going to be harmed by staying a few days longer, would have been taken care of. So he missed a big opportunity in more ways than one.
No.
And you apparently don't have enough faith in us to do what we suggest that you do.
Wow. Well, I wonder why he needed to be in that location. I'm sure there are reasons, but...
The aura, for one thing, the aura where HPB is in Bombay was far higher than anywhere else.
Now let us see what the future has in store. Morya. And that was 41. So 42, this is probably just a few days later, still January 1882.
Now this one is a little longer, quite a bit longer, so there's a lot of information to gain from this one.
And this is also from Morya still.
Yes.
Okay. Before another line passes between us, we must come to an agreement, my impulsive friend.
Now, Sinnett is very impulsive. He, as we saw with Stainton Moses, he gets an idea in his head and he writes it out and rides off in all directions, as they say. Gets on his horse and rides off in all directions. And he did the same thing with the suggestion about the letter to the newspaper.
Oh, right. And to Stainton Moses. He's done a lot of things that he's
he is an impulsive individual.
HPB did a couple things too.
She's very impulsive. And KH pointed that out, that Damodar, HPB, and Olcott are all impulsive. They're quick thinkers. They grasp an idea, and instead of taking time to think through it and plan everything carefully, they get on it immediately.
You know, that's not a typical quality of an advanced student or a master. That's not. But we can see that there is some value in taking action as opposed to inaction or inertia or procrastination, like I have sometimes. But that's not a typical quality. Impulsiveness is not a quality. Usually.
It's not a preferred quality at all, that's for sure. They would prefer someone who acts after pondering and thinking through something carefully. But, as you pointed out too, there's always the chance that people will stretch it out so long that that becomes an impediment. So
that's true too.
Somewhere in between is probably the optimum.
It's always a balance. Now, we teach, in practical modern-day terms, the Raja Yogic technique, skill requirement of non-reaction, which means literally non-impulsive acting.
Right.
But that doesn't mean don't act. That means definitely act, but not impulsively. It's just interesting that all of them have the quality of impulsion. That's interesting.
And maybe we at some point will figure out why they are the ones who actually did make more progress than some of the others.
I bet you it's simple. Because they act, they do things. They actually do. They create. They make things happen.
Right.
Which is better than not. But
exactly, and they make mistakes. So, I guess the main thing is that if you are impulsive and you make a mistake, admit it.
Yes.
Immediately.
Yes.
Learn
of
from
course.
it. Try to avoid making that sort of mistake again.
Willing to change.
Yes. It's when you make a mistake and then refuse to admit that you made a mistake.
You're stymieing your progress at that
Yes,
point.
you are.
Okay, before another line passes between us, we must come to an agreement, my impulsive friend. You will have first to promise me faithfully never to judge either of us, not of the situation, nor of anything else bearing on any relation to the, quote, mythical brothers, tall or short, thick or thin, by your worldly experience, or you will never come at the truth. This is interesting that he's flat out just requesting that. And when he says either of us, he means himself or Kuthum?
KH, yeah.
Okay. Gosh, to have these kinds of communications from a master, this is,
Yeah,
goodness.
and I don't think Sinnett fully recognized.
How could they? They don't know what.
No, they don't, because they had never heard
Right.
of them before. And the other people who didn't have communications, it's easy to see why they would totally discount, oh, it's just your fantasy, whatever.
Oh my goodness. By doing so, up till now, you have only disturbed the solemn quiet of my evening meals several nights running, and made my snake-like signature what with your writing. Let me try that again. By doing so, up till now, you have only disturbed the solemn quiet of my evening meals several nights running, and made my snake-like signature what with your writing it and thinking about it to haunt me even in my sleep. Since by
So apparently, Sinnett was fascinated by this ornate signature that Morya would sign his letters with. And so he was just doodling it on his own and thinking about Morya at the same time. But Morya was completely aware of it. And he said, your obsession with my signature is causing me to lose sleep.
Now, this is evidence of what Terry has said many times about how the masters intentionally remove themselves physically from the world and they stay hidden on purpose because they don't want all this bombardment of mental intrusion, really. We intrude into their realm if we think about them constantly and ponder and maybe send even positive or negative thoughts, but we're intruding.
There would be an enormous amount of negative energy sent at them that they would have to counteract.
Which takes energy and takes their time away.
That's exactly why they stay hidden behind the scenes, because they do not need that kind of energy. All it does is harm all of humanity because it distracts them from the work that they do.
It shows how sensitive you can be. And remember, we all have the ability to get to this stage. These masters were cavemen at one point.
And they still are, apparently. No,
but
they make fun of that. Yeah, we're these
they went through the process.
Gurus up in the caves of the
That's
Himalayas.
funny. And now it's a full circle. We're back in the caves again.
Yeah, exactly. No, they even they point out the highest Dhyan Chohans have gone through the same process. They were humans. They've gone through all the same things, not on this earth, but on some earth. They've gone through all of the same types of experiences that we are going through right now.
There's no other way. They get there from experience. It's not that they were lucky that they're born a master all of a sudden.
Yeah.
They did the work.
There's no shortcut.
So haunt me even in my sleep. Since by sympathy I felt it being pulled by the tail at the other side of the hills. You have a lifetime before you for our correspondence, although while the dark clouds of the Deva Loka eclectic are lowering on the horizon of the parent society, it has to be a spasmodic and an uncertain one.
I'm not quite sure what he's referring to. Devaloka would be the angel realm of the eclectic, so I have no idea. And the dark clouds of the eclectic, meaning the Shimla Eclectic Society, are lowering on the horizon of the parent society. I can only assume that there are some difficulties going on with that organization, in most likely involving Mr. Hume.
And what does spasmodic mean?
Spasmodic means just,
Okay.
you know, here and there, not smoothly.
But what we can gain from that is be patient. You have a lifetime before you for our correspondence. So Morya says he's not going anywhere.
Right.
So don't worry.
Yeah. So, and because Sinnett is impatient, he wants results now. He's not wanting to wait too long.
It may even suddenly break off owing to the tension given it by our too intellectual friend.
Okay, so that is, it is Hume that's causing the problem. So, yeah, they're saying it could break at any time now.
Oi hi, ram ram.
Now he's being silly here.
To think that our very mild criticism upon the pamphlet, a criticism reported by you to Hume Sahib, should have brought the latter to kill us at a blow, to destroy, without giving us one moment to call a padre in, or even time to repent. Oh, a padre, like a Catholic priest?
Yeah,
Padre?
there's a lot of influence. Well, in certain areas of India, there was a large, not Spanish, but Portuguese influence.
Oh.
And of course, the Catholic. But even in Portuguese, the word for father is padre. But somehow it got changed slightly in India, so they always refer to the Catholic priest as padre instead of padre.
He's poking fun at the
Yes.
repenting.
Oh, he's saying Hume's ready to kill us with one blow without even giving us a chance to call in the priest to repent before we die.
To find ourselves alive and yet so cruelly deprived of our existence is truly sad, though not entirely unexpected. Wow.
He gets really funny sometimes.
But it is all our own fault. Had we instead prudently sent a laudatory hymn to his address, we might now have been alive and well, waxing in health and strength, if not in wisdom, for long years to come, and finding in him our Veda Vyasa to sing the occult prowess of the Krishna and Arjuna on the desolate shores of Tsampo. He's getting very poetic here.
Yes, he is. So Veda Vyasa is the individual or group of individuals that wrote all of the Hindu philosophy down as a compilation. The Vedas, the Shastras, all of the Hindu scriptures were written supposedly by someone named Vyasa, and they gave him the name Veda Vyasa.
This is so interesting that he's mentioning this, because one of the commentaries on the Yoga Sutras, which isn't widely available, is by this individual, Vyasa.
And supposedly wrote even the Mahabharata.
Yes.
A very, very long poem. So it's very unlikely that it was actually one individual, but who knows for sure.
Well, he must be
and
part
the
of the
Tsampo is a sacred river that begins in Tibet and ends up in India.
Now that we are dead and dried up, though, he's really carrying this thing out.
Dried up meaning because Hume has all of these dried up birds in his museum.
Oh. I may as well occupy a few minutes of my time to write as a boot to you.
Meaning, boot is a spirit, a ghost.
In the best English I find lying idle in my friend's brain, where I also find in the cells of memory the phosphorescent thought of a short letter to be sent by him to the editor of the Pioneer to soothe his English impatience.
So, yeah, he's able to write in English, and that's probably why he's waxing so poetic here, because he uses KH's brain to transform his ideas into English.
Wow.
And he says, and while I'm peering into my friend's brain, I see that he's getting ready to write a letter to you.
Oh my gosh. Wait, so not Sinnett's brain. He's peering into someone.
In KH's brain.
Okay.
Because they are so close,
okay.
He can, even though he supposedly doesn't speak English very well, he can use his brain. Wow. And they do that with their chelas too. They would use Alcott and HPB to transmit their ideas into English so that they get the proper grammar and spelling of things.
Mm-hmm. My goodness. Your friend KH has not forgotten you, and he does not intend breaking off with you, unless Hume Sahib should spoil the situation beyond repair. And why should he? You have done all you could, and that is as much as we ever intend asking of anyone. And now, let's talk. You must thoroughly put aside the personal element if you would get on with occult study and, for a certain time, even with him, KH. Realize, my friend, that the social affections have little, if any, control over any true adept in the performance of his duty. In proportion as he rises toward perfect adeptship, the fantasies and antipathies of his former self are weakened. As KH, in essence, explained to you, he takes all mankind into his heart and regards them in the mass.
So this shows again that even though they have people that they're attracted to, like Sinnett, they consider him a friend, it's not because of the social aspect. It's because they see potential in this individual. Everything is done for humanity and on behalf of humanity, not for any personal gain. They do not care about the personal part of any relationship. It has to be that it serves the purpose of enhancing the spiritual development of humanity.
Your case is an exceptional one. You have forced yourself upon him and stormed the gates by the very violence and intensity of your feeling for him, and once accepted, he has to bear the consequences in the future. Still, it cannot be a question with him what the visible Sinnett may be, with his impulses, his failures or successes in his world, his diminished or undiminished regard for him. With the visible one, we have nothing to do. He is to us only a veil that hides from profane eyes that other ego with whose evolution we are concerned.
Meaning the higher self, the capital E ego.
In the external rupa, do what you like, think what you like. Do what you like, think what you like. Only when the effects of that voluntary action are seen on the body of our correspondent is it incumbent upon us to notice it. We are neither pleased nor displeased that you did not attend the Bombay meeting. If you had, it would have been better for your merit, but since you did not go, you lost that little point. I could and had no right to influence you in any way, precisely because you are not a chela. It was a test, a very little one, though it seemed important enough to you to make you think of wife and child's interests.
He was using that also as an excuse that his wife was not in great health. And so that, together with his concern about his bosses, were his reasons for not staying.
You will have many such tests, for though you should never be a chela, still we do not give confidences even to correspondents and proteges whose discretion and moral pluck have not been well tested. This is interesting.
This testing goes on forever, basically. Even the Mahatmas are being tested for their next increase in advancement.
I want to read that one more time. You will have many such tests, for though you should never be a chela. So it's already been decided that he won't be in this lifetime.
Not likely, but he's actually considered a lay chela. We'll see that term, L-A-Y, meaning you're not consecrated as a chela, but you're kind of acting as one. And it's a preparation, it's a preparatory step.
You are the victim of Maya. We've said that maybe once or twice, but that means illusion, glamour. It will be a long struggle for you to rip off the cataracts and see things as they are. Hume Sahib is a Maya to you as great as any. You see only his mounds of flesh and bones, his official personality, his intellect and influence. What are these compared to his true self that you cannot see, no matter what you do? What has his ability to shine in a Durbar or as the leader of a scientific society to do with his fitness for occult research or his trustworthiness to keep our secrets?
So Durbar is some kind of an official meeting or even a celebration sometimes of the English Raj, the leaders of the English government in India. They took a term from Hindi, Durbar, which is a certain type of court, and of course they changed the meaning of it to mean like a meeting or a celebration that has a high degree of pomp and circumstance to it. So Hume is right at home in that sort of thing. Sinnett probably much less so. So he's pointing out, you have this really high regard for this individual because of these superficial qualities that he has. We see him very differently.
If we wanted anything about our lives and work to be known, aren't the columns of the Theosophist open to us? Why should we dribble facts through him to be dressed for the public's consumption with a curry of nauseous doubts and biting sarcasm fit to throw the public's stomach into confusion? To him, nothing is sacred, inside of or outside of occultism. He is a bird-killing and faith-killing temperament.
Now he's going to get a little bit morbid here.
Oh, wow. He would as soon sacrifice his own flesh and blood as remorselessly as a songbird and would dry you and me, KH, and the dear old lady, and make us all bleed to death under his scalpel if he could, with as much ease as he would an owl, to put us away in his museum with appropriate labels on us and recount our necrologies in stray feathers to the amateurs. Why is
he does get a little carried away, but it's a little dramatic, but it's amusing too.
No, Sahib, the outside Hume is as different from and superior to the inside. Wow, the outside is superior to the inside?
Well, yes, because the outside is that he's, highly intelligent. He's
influential, wealthy.
Yeah, wealthy. He's well-known, well-respected, even though a lot of people didn't get along with him very well.
They're saying that's the more superior aspect of him.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Okay.
When you compare the outer Hume to the inner Hume, then what?
As the outside Sinnett is different from and inferior to the blossoming inside protege.
Aha. So do you see the juxtaposition here?
I hope Sinnett understands this.
Yeah. I hope he does.
Learn that and set the ladder to watching the editor, lest he play him a bad trick someday. Our greatest trouble is to teach pupils not to be fooled by appearances. Ooh.
So again, discernment. Mm-hmm. Discernment. Seeing things for what they are and not for what we assume or presume them to be. Yeah, discernment is absolutely essential if you're going to make any progress whatsoever.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, so many things we learn by reading these.
Mm-hmm. Looks like we're going to have to cut this letter short.
We're only in the middle of this. It's not a whole lot longer, but we're
at our next session. We'll pick right back up right there and continue along.
All right. So, any final words?
We're going to continue right there. Don't hold your breath, but we'll be back soon.
Yeah. We will.
Thank you.
We will see you in our next session.